National World War II Museum's podcast series, Service on Celluloid. This is our mini episode where I will answer comments and questions from the previous episode, as well as provide you, the listener, with oral histories from those who were there. My name is Seth Paradin, historian and digital content manager here at the National World War II Museum in New Orleans. Today, we will be continuing our discussion on the 1998 film Saving Private Ryan, directed by Steven Spielberg. The film is set around the Normandy invasion, better known as D-Day, and initially focuses on a company of U.S. Army Rangers set to land on Omaha Beach. Following the landing and the brutal fight to get off the beach, Captain Miller, played by Tom Hanks, is given command of a hand-picked squad to retrieve the sole surviving brother of a family of 4 who is somewhere inland with the scattered airborne drops. Saving Private Ryan stars Hanks, Tom Sizemore as Sergeant Horvath, Edward Burns as Reiben, Barry Pepper as Jackson, and Matt Damon as Private Ryan, among many others. The movie was a tremendous commercial and critical success, nominated for a total of 11 Academy Awards, and winning 5, including Best Director for Steven Spielberg. Of course, as nearly everyone knows, or at least anybody who's ever seen this movie knows, one of the first scenes in the film depicts the landings on Omaha Beach. Omaha was one of 5 Allied landing beaches on D-Day, the others being Gold, Juneau, Sword, and Utah, the other American beach being Utah. Without question, Omaha Beach was the bloodiest sector of the initial invasion front. And I'll give you a brief history of the actual landings on Omaha Beach now. Around 0630 hours on June 6th, roughly 1,450 American assault troops from the 1st Infantry Division, which was a veteran unit, and the 29th Infantry Division, which was a green or new infantry division, landed in only 36 LCVP Higgins boats on Omaha Beach. When people think of when people think of the Normandy landings, they think of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of boats coming ashore because that's what movies have told us it was actually like, and that's not really true. You can only fit so many people in so many boats, and you only had so many boats to accomplish the landing. And when you really think about it, 36 boats landing on a beach is really not that many. But when they landed, the tide was at its low point on Omaha. And if you've ever been there and you've seen low tide, which obviously happens every day, it exposes a huge amount of open sand. And it's about 500 meters, give or take, depending on where you are on the beach, from the water's edge to the dry land, to the shingle, as they called it there. There was a small seawall there during the war. And that 500 meters is wide open. There's absolutely no cover. There's nothing there at all to take cover from enemy fire. And when these guys hit the beach, they had, as I said, about 500 meters at Dog Green, which is the sector that's portrayed in the movie. And they were under constant fire from the machine guns and artillery from the German 352nd Infantry Division. Those were the guys that were defending that area. This was a veteran unit. This was a unit that the German unit was a veteran unit that had been on the Eastern Front recently, and they were shipped over to Normandy to rest and recuperate and guard the beaches. So while a lot of Allied units that landed on D-Day landed against German units that were not necessarily, quote, front line, unquote, units, they weren't the best quality units. The 352nd was quite the opposite of that. They were a veteran unit, and they were ready to fight. As soon as the landing ramps on the LCVPs hit the shore, the Germans unleashed a volley of fire that was absolutely tremendous. Withering machine gun fire was cutting the men down even before they could exit their landing craft, just like they show in the movie. Within 5 minutes, the initial assault wave, the first wave, was decimated by nearly 90% casualties. Now, that's not necessarily 90% men killed, but that's 90% of the men that landed at that time were killed or wounded. They were incapacitated or to some degree, ineffective for combat. In the movie, it kind of flashes through the assault on Omaha Beach, and obviously, you could make a movie about the assault on Omaha Beach, and it could be 3 hours long, but Spielberg had to cut it for time. But that's something that people tend to think of. They hit the beach, it took a lot of casualties, and they got off the beach. That's not true. For nearly 3 hours, American forces were pinned down by heavy and accurate German fire, machine gun fire, rifle fire, artillery, mortars, the whole nine. Officers and non-commissioned officers, those are sergeants and above, really anyone who was attempting to show some sort of leadership to get the infantry off the beach, they were targeted by the Germans and eliminated for obvious reasons because they wanted to leave the Americans leaderless. They wanted to cut off the leaders and then eliminate the men one by one. Finally, around 10 o'clock that morning, movement along the beach, specifically around Easy Red and Dog Green, is observed offshore by American and Allied ships, because initially the landing, at least in Omaha, even after the first and second and third waves were put ashore, it was stagnant. It was just a stalemate. Movement is seen because some of the infantry is basically, they're tired of getting killed, so they're moving up along the shore, trying to get inland, and then shortly before noon, the majority of the beach is in American hands. So I mean, this is about 5.5-ish hours of straight combat on Omaha Beach, which is something that people don't really think of. They think of it as something being really fast, and it was not. What's left of the American assault troops, which is very, very, very little, begin to move inland and capture small coastal towns and villages, of which there are many along the shoreline. While the cost of D-Day is high all over, the cost at Omaha is absolutely tremendous. Over 2,500 Americans are killed on Omaha Beach alone, as compared to 197 that were killed on neighboring Utah Beach. So, I mean, the difference is absolutely drastic and very dramatic. Bloody Omaha, as it becomes known, would forever be remembered for its carnage on 6th of June. One of the eyewitnesses to the carnage on Omaha Beach was a gentleman by the name of Dr. Harold Baumgarten. As was mentioned in the main episode, Dr. Hal served with B Company 29th Infantry and landed in the second wave on Omaha Beach at Dog Green Sector, which is the sector that's portrayed in the movie. He wrote a book after the war. It was called Eyewitness Omaha Beach, and his recollections served as the basis for research for Steven Spielberg when he was shooting and planning the Omaha Beach scene. While the movie provides visceral depictions of the landings at Dog Green, nothing, and I do mean absolutely nothing, can compare to hearing the words of Dr. Hal describing what he saw with his own eyes that morning. So let's take a listen and hear what Dr. Hal's got to say about landing at Dog Green on Omaha Beach on the 6th of June, 1944.
The first thing I saw, a Company B boat on my left, port side, blew up, hit a mine. We were showered with wood, metal, and body parts. When our ramp went down, the signal for every machine gun on that beach to open up on the exit to our ship. So Harold Donaldson, the lieutenant, was gunned down in the boat like you see in Saving Private Ryan. I hit the sand behind the hedgehog, which is about 130 yards from the seawall, and I observed to my right Private Robert Dittmar, Fairfield, Connecticut. I was yelling. He tripped over the hedgehog, spun completely around, lying on his back and yelling, "I'm hit, I'm hit, Mom, Mother," and then he was silent. I looked over to my left, and Sergeant Clarence Robeson of Lynchburg, Virginia. I always mention their names and where they came from. I don't want people to forget about them. Clarence Robeson was staggering by me without his helmet, gaping hole in the left side of his forehead. His blonde hair was streaked with blood. I was yelling, "Get down." This used to be my nightmares. I'd be yelling, "Get down," because I never forgot that scene. And I guess he couldn't hear me anyway. The noise on that beach was horrendous. All these shells coming in, flamethrowers blowing up with the guys getting on fire. Noise was tremendous. He staggered all the way behind me to the left, knelt down on the sand behind me in about 3 inches of water at that time, because the tide was coming in. And he started praying with his rosary beads. And the machine gun up on the bluff fired over my head and cut him in half. I got to the wall. There was a fellow named Dominic Suro there. Not a scratch on him. Bigger than me. He weighed at least 200 plus, from Georgia. And he knew me from Company A. He said, "Hal, you stay here. I'm going to go get some help." But I couldn't stay there because I was in the range of that machine gun on the right. You know, the camouflaged house. So I followed him down the wall. And all of a sudden I heard clunk. A sniper shot him right through the head. And he was gone. Why not me? I was right behind them. My number wasn't up.
I just realized I got to go back and actually correct myself real quick. I said that the 1st Infantry and the 29th Infantry were the ones that landed on Omaha Beach, and while they were, no doubt, there were a lot of other units that did too, and I don't want to slight anybody. There were a lot of Naval Beach battalions. There was U.S. Army Rangers that landed on Omaha Beach. There were a lot of other guys aside from the 1st and 29th, so I just wanted to get that out of the way real quick before I went too much further. And speaking of that, one of the other people that landed on Omaha Beach was a gentleman by the name of Harley Reynolds. Harley landed on a different sector of Omaha than Hal. He landed at Easy Red sector with the 1st Infantry Division and the 16th Infantry Regiment. Hal was new to combat. When Hal landed on Omaha Beach at Dog Green, he was new. He was green, as was the vast majority of the 29th Infantry Division. There was some cadre in there, but most of those guys, I'd say 95 or more %, had never heard a shot fired in anger. Harley Reynolds was the opposite of that. He was an infantryman in the 1st Division. He'd served with the 1st since 1943, and he was in the Sicily campaign. And he'd seen his fair share of combat, so he'd, as they said in the Civil War, he'd seen the elephant. He knew what combat was all about, and he'd been in some nasty scrapes before he ever even landed on Omaha Beach. But any historian who reads anything about, or anybody who reads anything about Omaha Beach will know pretty quick that the two nastiest sectors of the landing area on Omaha were Dog Green and Easy Red, and Harley landed on Easy Red, as I said. His landing, his wave was actually supposed to be the second wave, but due to the massive confusion, and there was confusion all over the beaches, it wasn't just Omaha, but there was a great deal of confusion on Omaha, his landing wave actually became the assault wave because they were early and the actual assault wave was late. So he was one of the first guys to set foot on the Easy Red sector of Omaha Beach. And I remember one veteran saying, and I unfortunately cannot remember his name, but he said that when describing Easy Red, he said that it was certainly not easy, but it was plenty red. Regardless of that, Harley landed on Omaha amidst all the chaos and carnage. And in this oral history clip, he tells us what he saw and how he eventually got inland due to the heroism of one unknown man who he still, to this day, does not know who performed the action that he's going to describe here. So let's listen to Harley and see what he's got to say.
But we landed at low tide, and that meant that we had to run from low tide all the way to dry land, and that was, I think they estimated it to be 300 meters. That's over 300 yards. And we're being shot at because the German orders were to wait until we were in the water before they opened fire on us. First man that was hit, he was hit on the ramp right alongside of me, close enough that I could have touched him at any time just by reaching to my left, and he was my radio man. I made it about 20 yards or so, or maybe 30 yards to an obstacle. I went down behind it on one knee, but the bullets were coming through that hedgehog, and it seemed to me they were coming between my legs, under my arms, that I realized that I had to move. And I got up and in one run made it all the way through that 300 yards or so to the shingles. All that time that we were lying there, we were under constant machine gun fire and mortar fire and a lot of artillery fire. To describe that in what we went through in full, it would be much faster for me to recommend that you see the movie Saving Private Ryan. A man crawled up on my right side, and I saw what he was doing. He had a Bangalore in two sections, and he was putting it under the barbed wire, and which he managed to do, pulled the fuse on it to light the primer, backed up a little bit, and I braced myself for the Bangalore to go off, and it didn't go off. The man crawled back up to it, removed it. It was wet or defective or something from the water. He crawled back up and removed that bad lighter, put a new one in it, pulled the string on it, started to back up, and as he's backing up, he's looking at in my direction, and at that second he was hit, and his eyes looked directly into mine, and with the look in his eyes as he died was a questioning look or a puzzling look. It's hard to describe. And then his eyes just closed. To me, that man was the greatest hero on that beach, because that Bangalore went off, and when it went off, I was up and through that wire.
Saving Private Ryan, as we talked about in the main episode, was I think was cathartic to a lot of veterans, and it wasn't just D-Day veterans. It was World War II veterans in general. One of the good things, one of the many good things that happened because of Saving Private Ryan, was I think SPR opened the floodgates for veterans' memories. It allowed, and I mean, as flag waving and maybe a little sappy as the first scene and the final scene of SPR is, with the old man walking through the cemetery. As I said again in the main episode, it's something that I think a lot of veterans could relate to. Kaylee put it perfectly when she said that it was very evident from that scene that the people in Ryan's family had no idea about his story. They knew that he was in the Army, obviously, and they knew he was in 101st, but they had no clue about what happened to him during the war because he didn't talk about it, and that was not uncommon. And SPR and books that were written before and after Saving Private Ryan, not the least of which was Stephen Ambrose's D-Day and Citizen Soldiers, helped open up those floodgates and help veterans to understand that it's okay to talk about your memories. And as a matter of fact, we want to hear them. And that was huge in terms of what got this museum started. We get questions all the time as to why the National World War II Museum, at the time when it opened, the National D-Day Museum, is in New Orleans, Louisiana. A lot of people think we're in D.C. or some other large city, but no, we're right here in the city of New Orleans. And people ask why. And the reason for that is, well, it's pretty easy. Quickly, Dr. Stephen Ambrose, who was the writer and a history professor at the University of New Orleans, one of his topics that he wrote about was President Dwight Eisenhower, and he interviewed Eisenhower several times. And when talking to Eisenhower one time, Eisenhower mentioned that he asked Ambrose, had he ever heard of Andrew Higgins? And Ambrose replied, no. And Eisenhower told Ambrose, he said, well, Higgins is the guy that won the war for us. And that floored Dr. Ambrose. And he set about trying to find out who the hell Andrew Higgins was. Well, Andrew Higgins was the guy who designed and ran the factory that built the LCVPs, the landing craft vehicle personnels, the Higgins boats, which were not just used at D-Day. They were used at almost every major amphibious operation in World War II, even starting at Guadalcanal. And it's an iconic piece of World War II equipment, and they were every single one of them was built right here in the city of New Orleans. And Ambrose initially wanted to start a D-Day museum, which he did. He wanted to start it on the shores of Lake Pontchartrain here in New Orleans, which would have put it right by the University of New Orleans, but it would have wiped us out after Hurricane Katrina because there was really nothing left of that. So it was probably a good thing that he didn't get his wish initially anyway and put the museum by the lake. But the museum was founded in 1998, and we opened up in 2000 as the National D-Day Museum, as I said. And then in 2005, we became the National World War II Museum, designated by Congress to tell the story of America's role in the Second World War, and that's why I'm here. One of the first things that I did when I came here to the National World War II Museum was collect oral histories. And this all goes back, I'm not trying to ramble, but this all goes right back to Saving Private Ryan. As I said, it was cathartic to veterans, I think, and it allowed people to be able to tell their story. And the oral histories are the crowning jewel of this museum, and I don't think you'll get an argument out of anybody on that. Because it's the firsthand memories of the people that actually did or participated in these momentous events like Dr. Harold Baumgarten or Harley Reynolds or other veterans that you'll hear on this, not just this podcast, but if you come to the National World War II Museum. And we use oral histories here everywhere in the museum. We use them in our permanent exhibits, our temporary exhibits. We use them in the films that we have in our exhibits. We use them in the kiosks that correlate with whatever theme that you're looking at. If you're looking at Guadalcanal, you can go to the kiosk and hear oral histories from Marines who were at the Tenerife River and Navy pilots who fought at Santa Cruz. And I mean, it goes on and on and on. Saving Private Ryan or the oral history collection here at the museum, rather. Let me say this. The oral history collection at the museum is a direct result of Ambrose's books and Saving Private Ryan. Of course, Ambrose did a lot of oral histories himself. That's where the program actually started, obviously. And Saving Private Ryan reignited the public interest in World War II. You know, there hadn't been World War II movies made, a lot of them anyway, made before SPR in the previous 10 years or so before SPR. I think, as Martin said, most of those movies were Vietnam movies. They weren't World War II movies, or at least not good ones. And it allowed for the previously silent veterans, even those who had been determined to remain silent for the rest of their lives, open up and tell their stories. And those stories are incredibly important, not just to this museum, but to the history of this country. And it shows that how ordinary people stepped up when times were really bad. And they'll never be forgotten, and they're important stories. And if you'd like to see them, and you'd like to see the complete oral histories you heard today or any other ones, please visit our digital collections at www.2online.org. That's www.2online.org. So thanks so much for listening. Tune in next week where we will discuss another of Steven Spielberg's masterpieces, Schindler's List. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Service on Celluloid. Be sure to rate and review us on iTunes if you like what you hear. I'd like to thank everyone who made this podcast possible. Our producer, Tessa Jager, and our sound engineer, Jeremy Burson. This has been a production of the National World War II Museum.